Have you ever felt like the whole world has turned away from you? As if suddenly the voices around you have fallen silent, the doors have closed, and even familiar faces have become distant. This moment of deep silence, which many call loneliness, is not a punishment, it is a call. Carl Jung said, "Loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate what is important to you." When the universe pulls us away from distractions, it is not rejecting us, it is calling us inward. And that is where it all begins. At 50 or older, this experience becomes common. Children grow up, friends drift away. Work is no longer as fulfilling as it once was. The promises of the outside world no longer seem to echo within. And then, emptiness appears, a silence that fills not only the house, but the soul. But what seems like abandonment may actually be a sacred process, a moment of pause imposed by existence itself, so that we can rediscover who we are beneath all the masks. Jung called this individuation, the path back to the center, to oneself. An inner journey where we cease to be what others expected of us and become what we have always been, even if we have forgotten it. This kind of silence is not new. It has been experienced by sages, philosophers, artists, mothers, fathers, and ordinary people. It is the same silence that Thoreau sought in Walden, that Jung found on the shores of Lake Zurich when he built his stone tower to listen to himself. The same silence that so many, even without meaning to, ended up finding when life took away what filled their days. And yet this silence does not come empty. It brings questions, it brings memories, it brings what has been stored for decades in a hidden corner of the soul. It is as if, in retreat, the layers of time fall away and we begin to hear an ancient voice, a voice that has never stopped whispering, but until then was drowned out by the noise of the world. That voice asks, "Who are you now that no one is watching?" And that question, though painful, is liberating, because for the first time, we no longer need to pretend. We no longer need to please, compete, prove ourselves. We are there, stripped of the expectations of others, facing the truest mirror, ourselves. Isolation is then a portal, a threshold between what we were and what we can be. It is uncomfortable because it forces us to see what we avoid, but it is also liberating because, for the first time, we can consciously choose what we want to carry forward and what it is time to let go. Jung knew that this process was not easy. He wrote that, "No one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but rather by making the darkness conscious." And that is exactly what the universe does when it silences us. It offers us the chance to illuminate what was hidden. This is not a call to give up on the world, but to return to it in a different way, more whole, more profound, more lucid. What emerges from this dive is not fragility, but wisdom. The kind of wisdom that only those who have gone through the dark night of the soul can carry in their eyes. It takes courage to listen to silence, to not immediately fill it with distractions, tasks, commitments, or social media. You have to sit in front of the void and let it speak, because it always speaks, and what it says can change everything. Maybe you're going through this right now. Maybe you feel like the universe has taken everything away from you. But what if, in fact, it was just trying to give you back yourself? What if this apparent abandonment was actually a unique opportunity to be reborn from the inside out? The journey inward is silent, but full of meaning. And as Jung reminds us, those who look outside dream, those who look inside awaken. This is the invitation the universe is extending to you right now. Don't despair. The silence that surrounds you is fertile, and the seed it wants to germinate is you. When silence settles in and the presence of others no longer fills the space, a new space emerges, a void that many fear. But it is in this space that awakening begins. What appeared to be a dark tunnel is actually an invisible womb where the soul rebuilds itself. It is in this environment, without noise, without distractions, without applause, that something begins to move within us. At first, everything seems opaque. The hours pass slowly. The house is too quiet. The routine has lost its meaning. But it is precisely this suspension that opens the door to something greater, the rediscovery of what was dormant within us. Carl Jung said that for someone to become who they really are, they must first cross the shadow. And the shadow does not appear in the light of the stage, nor in the noise of the crowds. It reveals itself in the darkness of silent days. It is in this seemingly barren setting that the unconscious begins to speak. And it does not speak as we are accustomed to, hearing. It communicates through symbols, memories, dreams, sensations. That is why many confuse this process with sadness, loneliness, or even madness. But it is not an illness. It is a transition. It is as if the soul, tired of being ignored, finally knocks on the door. In this process, it is common to revisit old passages of life, a conversation that hurt, a mistake that still weighs heavily, a moment that was never fully digested. The rational mind tries to understand why all this is coming back now, but it is not the rational mind that is in charge. It is the deep part of the psyche that is organizing what has been left behind. This reunion can be painful, not because it reveals something bad, but because it shows what has been forgotten, what has not been taken care of. Jung warned us that there is no real growth without confronting the denied parts of ourselves, and these parts, these shadows, take shape in solitude. It is when no one is looking that the true self presents itself. There is a natural wisdom in this process. Just as night comes before dawn, psychic darkness precedes inner clarity. Those who go through this time with courage discover that at the center of the void there is a silent presence, a life force that does not depend on anyone else to exist. This force has always been there, but it was covered by social roles, external demands, and family expectations. When all of this dissolves, what remains is the essential, and the essential does not shout. It whispers. This whisper may come in the form of a gentle memory, an old desire reborn, a small gesture that now seems full of meaning. The soul begins to reorganize the chaos. What once seemed like the end becomes a passage. What once seemed like ruin reveals its foundation. Jung saw this as part of the process of individuation, becoming who you are in your entirety. This does not mean perfection, but integration. It is accepting light and shadow, the past and the present, pain and peace. Individuation is not an intellectual concept, but an experience that silently transforms. And it is in this second birth that life begins to take on a new glow. It is not the glow of success, performance, or external validation. It is an inner glow, discreet, steady, unshakable, a glow that comes from self-knowledge and acceptance. But this glow is only possible after the journey, and the journey begins in darkness. Like a seed germinating underground, transformation does not happen on the surface. It happens in the dark, in silence, in the invisible. Modern culture has taught us to fear emptiness, to fill every space with urgency, noise, tasks. But emptiness has a sacred role. It is the womb of renewal. And for those who are willing to listen to it, it reveals a path that was not visible before. So if you feel lost right now, know that you are not regressing. You are passing through. You are being called to look within. You are being led to something deeper and more true. And, as Jung taught, only those who dive into their own darkness are able to find their true light. There is a moment in every inner journey when words run out, when the world seems to have lost its color and old pleasures become pale. Nothing excites, nothing animates. It is as if the soul has entered an invisible winter. This state, which so many fear and try to avoid, has been called by mystics, poets, and philosophers the dark night of the soul. Carl Jung did not describe it with this name, but he knew this phase well. He lived it intensely. It was during a period of profound crisis, when he withdrew from clinical practice and plunged into his own abysses, that he produced his most transformative work. Because this night is not a failure, it is a passage. It is not a fall, it is a purification. In the dark night, everything that sustained us ceases to make sense. Certainties disappear, answers no longer work, masks fall away. And with them go the roles that once protected us. The ego, with its defense mechanisms, begins to crumble, and in this collapse, space emerges for something more true. But there is no way to rush this phase. It needs to be lived with honesty. It is a time of symbolic loss where old patterns die. It is a journey through the desert of the soul, and it is there, in that arid landscape, that the signs of a new life being formed emerge. Jung understood that this emptying was necessary. He spoke of the alchemical process of inner transformation. In the language of alchemy, the first stage is nigredo, darkness, chaos, confusion. Only after this can purification, enlightenment, and rebirth emerge. It is not easy to endure nigredo. It is a state in which the meaning of existence seems suspended, and yet it is this state that prepares the fertile ground. The pain of the soul is not punishment, it is childbirth, and like all childbirth, it requires courage, surrender, presence. Many, when faced with this crisis, try to escape. They seek distractions, immerse themselves in excess, resort to quick fixes. But none of this solves anything, because what is happening is not external. It is the soul asking to be heard. It is the unconscious pressing for old patterns to be broken and new possibilities to emerge. This night can last weeks, months, sometimes years. There is no calendar for the soul. Each person has their own time. But what defines it is not its duration. It is its depth. It is the intensity with which we are invited to strip ourselves of illusions and recognize what truly matters. During this period, it is common to lose interest in the outside world. It is as if something inside us knows that there is nothing else out there that truly nourishes us, and at the same time, a stillness begins to settle in, a silence laden with meanings still hidden. Jung said that all genuine transformation involves pain. But he also said that it is in pain that consciousness awakens. The dark night is not the destruction of the self, but of that which imprisoned it. It does not kill us, it frees us. It returns us to what we have forgotten, the mystery of existence, the presence of the sacred, the strength of the soul. And when this process is embraced, something changes. Little by little, colors return. The little things regain their value. A ray of sunshine in the morning, the smell of coffee, a silent hug, an unexpected gesture of kindness. Everything that the ego ignored becomes precious. This new sensitivity is a sign that something in us has been touched, that we have crossed over, that we have returned different, not necessarily stronger in the usual sense, but more whole, more lucid, more humble in the face of mystery. The dark night of the soul is not the end. It is the middle. It is the bridge between the life built on expectations and the life lived with truth. And those who accept to cross it, even with fear, even in silence, discover a strength that does not come from will, but from essence. If you are in this moment right now, don't rush. Don't try to fill the void. Just breathe. Allow yourself to be where you are. Because that place, however dark it may seem, is fertile, and from its silence, a version of yourself that you never imagined possible can emerge. If you like reflections like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. Not all loneliness is absence. Sometimes it is presence of something more subtle, more essential, that can only be perceived when the noise ceases. There is a loneliness that is not helplessness, but a call to listen. A stillness that does not imprison but prepares the ground where the roots of the soul can finally grow deeper. Carl Jung, after living through his own inner journey, decided to build a stone tower on the shore of a lake in Switzerland. There, away from social commitments, professional obligations, and intellectual pressure, he rediscovered himself. In his tower in Bollingen, he wrote, drew, sculpted, and dreamed, not for others but for himself, to give shape to what came from within. It was his creative solitude, a sacred space where the invisible took shape. This kind of solitude is not sought by logic, but felt by the soul. It is like a return to the original state before the demands of the world, an inner place where one can finally lay down one's arms and let the masks fall. There, without external expectations, what emerges is not emptiness, it is inspiration. Inspiration not in the romantic, idealized sense, but as an internal, spontaneous movement that springs from silent listening. It is in this listening that dreams become clearer, that ideas arise effortlessly, that old desires reveal themselves to be alive despite the passage of time. The soul speaks, but it can only be heard when there is space for its voice. Many who go through this phase of withdrawal report a change in their perception of time. The days become longer, gestures slower, the senses sharper. There is a natural slowing down, as if the body knows it is time to step out of the imposed rhythm and into a more authentic beat. It is as if every little thing, previously ignored, now has something to teach. Jung believed that the unconscious manifests itself through images, symbols, and metaphors, and these signs often emerge when we are not too busy to notice them. A recurring dream, an old object that resurfaces, a song that plays at just the right moment, a memory that seems to have returned with a message. In this state of creative solitude, these manifestations cease to be coincidences and come to be understood as expressions of the self, as internal answers to questions we didn't even know we were asking. Synchronicity intensifies. Intuition refines itself, and consciousness begins to realize that there is an intelligence at work beyond rational control. Great works of humanity were born from this place. Thoreau in his cabin in Walden, Leonardo da Vinci in his solitary notebooks, Clarice Lispector in her silent early mornings, all of them at some point withdrew not out of weakness, but out of vital necessity. Because they knew that depth does not come from haste, that creativity is not productivity, that the essential does not shout, it whispers. This fertile solitude requires neither talent nor vocation, only availability, the gesture of listening, of welcoming what arises, of not judging what comes. Perhaps it is a poem, perhaps a thought, perhaps just a different kind of silence. The value is not in the form, but in the space you create for the new to be born. And this birth is not necessarily artistic. It can be a new way of looking at life, a new rhythm for your days, a different way of being with yourself. This is what happens when the soul finds freedom to move, when it is no longer suffocated by papers and begins to breathe autonomously. This phase is precious, but often interrupted by the rush to return. Modern culture teaches us that being alone is dangerous, unproductive, useless. But Jung knew that it is precisely in this state that the greatest encounters happen. The encounter with the true self, with the deepest contents of the unconscious, with what has not yet been experienced. So if you find yourself in this silence, today don't rush it. Don't label it as a problem. It may be the exact space where your soul is for the first time able to express itself without censorship. Perhaps you are beginning to hear a whisper that has always been there, but has only now found space to be heard. Not everything that happens is the result of chance. Sometimes there are encounters, words, coincidences that cross our path with such precision that they seem to have been tailor-made for the exact moment they arise. Jung called this synchronicity, events that, although not causally connected, are linked by a deeper meaning. They are symbolic responses from the universe to processes unfolding within us. Imagine you are in silence, going through a period of reflection. You feel something inside you changing, but you can't put your finger on it. Then a book falls from the shelf, opening to a page that describes exactly how you feel, or, while walking aimlessly, you meet someone who says something that echoes, like a revelation. There is no apparent logic, but the impact is real, and you know deep down that it wasn't random. These moments are not rare when the soul is open. When we silence the external noise, we become more receptive to the subtle signals that the world emits all the time. Synchronicity is the language of the invisible. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't impose itself, it presents itself. It's up to us to notice. Jung believed that the collective unconscious, a kind of psychic field shared by all humanity, manifests itself through these meaningful coincidences, and that when we are more connected to our essence, we become more sensitive to this field, not because we develop special powers, but because we begin to live in greater harmony with the totality of life. Synchronicity manifests itself in various ways. It can be an image that repeats itself in different places, a phrase that is heard more than once in different situations, a dream that symbolically materializes in reality, an unexpected encounter that changes the direction of a choice. They are like small portals, moments where time seems to bend to deliver a message, These experiences are not meant to prove anything to anyone. They do not follow the rules of rationality. They are intimate, personal, sometimes impossible to explain, but deeply transformative for those who experience them. It is as if the universe, for a brief moment, leans toward us and says, "You are on the right path, keep going." During individuation, the process of becoming who you are, synchronicity intensifies, because the inner journey stirs deep, layers of the psyche. And these layers, when stirred, are reflected in the world. What is outside begins to resonate with what is inside, not as magic, but as symbolic correspondence. Jung reported several clinical cases in which patients' dreams, images, or thoughts aligned in surprising ways with external events. This led him to realize that life is not just a sequence of material causes and effects. There is a symbolic fabric behind events, a pattern that connects the inner and outer worlds. Synchronicity, therefore, is not something that is sought or forced. It happens when there is openness, attention, and connection with one's own internal process. You have to be present, observe without anxiety, welcome without haste, be available for what presents itself, even if it doesn't make immediate sense. In the silence of solitude, when we are no longer busy trying to control everything, these messages begin to arrive. And little by little, we feel that we are not as alone as we thought, that there is a greater intelligence at work, that there is something, even if invisible, that accompanies us. This kind of experience does not depend on belief. It imposes itself through the power of meaning, and anyone who has been through it knows it is impossible to come out the same after experiencing it. Because something changes in the way you look at the world, we begin to perceive details with more reverence, to recognize that there is poetry in chance, that there are answers between the lines of life. And maybe that's why in the darkest moments, these coincidences happen more often. Because it's when we're most fragile that the universe gets closer, not to distract us, but to remind us that we're being guided. Even if we don't understand the path yet, loneliness can come in two forms. One is chosen, the other is imposed. Both place us in front of the same mirror, but through different paths. Jung understood that it is not the circumstance itself that determines the value of the experience, but rather how we position ourselves in relation to it. Therefore, both voluntary retreat and forced isolation carry the potential for transformation, as long as we are able to go through them with presence and openness. Voluntary retreat stems from an intimate decision. It is the moment when someone, feeling the need to get away from the noise of the world, chooses silence, not as an escape, but as a reunion. It can be a break from socializing, a solo trip, a time without commitments. There is a conscious intention behind this choice to listen to oneself, to perceive what has been muffled by obligations, external voices, and the daily rush. Jung regularly withdrew to his tower in Bollingen. There, far from the rationality of urban life, he allowed himself to create, reflect, and dream. It was a space for integration with the unconscious, an opening to mystery, and it is no coincidence that many of his most profound ideas emerged during these periods of seclusion. In voluntary retreat, there is freedom. Those who enter this space do so with a willingness to listen. There is no resistance, there is surrender. The person withdraws from the world not out of contempt but out of reverence for what they want to hear within themselves. This listening, however, is not always easy. Often what emerges is old, dense, neglected. But it is precisely this material that needs to be integrated. Forced isolation is different. It does not ask for permission. It comes through loss, illness, breakups, unexpected changes. It can arise with the death of a loved one, the end of a relationship, retirement, or children moving away. It is a loneliness that we do not choose, but that chooses us. At first, everything seems out of control. A feeling of abandonment, injustice, helplessness. It is natural to try to resist, to seek to return to normal. However, the more we fight against reality, the further we move away from what it can teach us. Jung said that the unconscious guides us when the conscious mind has lost its direction. And often, forced isolation is just that, the unconscious calling us back home. A call to stop, to feel, to reflect on what is out of place. It is not a Punishment. It is internal reorganization. Even when it is unwanted, isolation can become fertile. As long as we stop fighting it and start asking, what is this absence showing me? What does this silence want to reveal? What inside me needs to be seen and has been ignored until now? The difference between retreat and isolation, then, lies not only in their origin, but in our attitude. We can experience a voluntary retreat with restlessness and impatience, and it will produce nothing new. We can be in forced isolation with acceptance and curiosity, and it will become fertile ground. It all depends on how we open ourselves to the experience. The essential thing is to understand that in both cases, there is an invitation to stop running, to listen to the inner whispers, to realize what life is trying to realign. And often this invitation comes disguised as loss, distance, apparent stagnation. Jung reminded us that healing does not come from outside. It begins the moment we stop avoiding pain and decide to go through it. And both retreat and isolation are spaces where this journey can take place, if we allow it. So if you are alone, it doesn't matter if you chose it or were led to it. What matters most is what you will do with this time. It can be a period of emptiness or an opportunity for revelation. It can be exile or a womb. It depends on how you look at it. It depends on how you listen. And if you decide to open yourself up to what this solitude has to say, you will discover that there is something in it that is not absence but presence. A deep, silent, and revealing presence. A presence that you may not yet know, but that is there, waiting to be recognized. Yourself. Every inner journey has two movements, the dive and the return. Descending into your own abyss, facing your shadows, silencing the world, crossing the void. All of this is necessary. But there comes a moment when something reorganizes itself within. And when that happens, a new form of presence is born. You return. Not to the same place, not with the same eyes, but you return. And it is this return that transforms everything around you. In mythological tradition, the hero leaves, faces trials, and returns with a gift. He is no longer who he was. He returns with an expanded consciousness, with knowledge that cannot be learned from books, but from the direct experience of pain and overcoming it. Jung saw this cycle not only as a metaphor, but as an archetype, a deep pattern of the human psyche. All of us at some point are called to leave, to descend, to lose ourselves, and ultimately to return. Upon returning, however, something has changed. Those who return no longer carry the rush to please, the fear of disappointing, the need to prove their worth. There is a quietness in their gaze, a firmer presence, a simpler way of being in the world. Small things become big again, and big. Things often lose their importance. After the journey, you no longer need to fill your time with distractions. Silence, once feared, is now company. Loneliness, once seen as a flaw, is now fertile ground. The wounds that burned become scars that tell stories. And these stories don't need to be told to everyone. They live within you, and that's enough. Relationships also change. There is more clarity about what deserves your presence. The filter of what is essential becomes finer. What was once tolerated for fear of rejection is now dispensed with serenity. The space around you reflects your new inner space, and little by little life regains its rhythm, not imposed but your own. It is not a triumphant return. There are no fireworks or applause. It is a quiet, intimate return, where the greatest recognition comes from within. You realize that, even in the absences, even in the losses, something has remained steadfast. A strength that was once imperceptible now manifests itself with clarity. It is not arrogance, it is certainty. A certainty that does not need to be shouted from the rooftops. It is common at this point to feel the desire to share, to help others get through it too. But the true gift of return is not in convincing anyone, but in being present. Being there, listening, witnessing. Your very existence, when lived with depth, becomes a silent inspiration for those who are still on their way. Jung said that individuation leads to wholeness, not perfection. What returns is not an idealized, being free of contradictions, but someone reconciled with their parts. Someone who no longer denies what they feel, but understands their cycles. Who knows that there will be other winters, other falls, other silences, and that all of this is part of it. The return is also marked by gratitude, not superficial, rehearsed gratitude, but gratitude that comes from recognizing that the pain had a purpose, that the silence was necessary, that isolation did not destroy, but revealed. It is a calm gratitude, without obligation, a feeling that does not need to be declared aloud, because it is expressed in the way one lives. This new way of living is slower, more sensitive, more authentic. The body responds with greater presence. Choices become more coherent. The gaze lingers on the little things, and the heart, now less burdened, finds lightness even in uncertainty. It is possible that the world outside does not understand your change, that some people expect you to go back to who you were. But something inside you no longer allows this regression. The return is not to the same starting point, it is to a new cycle, and in this new cycle you recognize yourself as never before. The inner journey is not a detour from life, it is the path itself, and the return, when lived with awareness, does not take us back to the familiar, but leads us to a new way of inhabiting what has always been there, like someone who rediscovers their own home, but this time they enter through the right door. The silence that seemed like punishment turned out to be fertile ground. Loneliness, once feared, became revealing company. What seemed to be the end of everything turned out to be the beginning of a journey. And now, looking back, you can see it wasn't the universe that abandoned you. It was the universe that, with silent wisdom, put you on a path of transformation. Carl Jung said that the encounter with oneself is, at first, an unpleasant experience, because it requires us to face what we avoid, to listen to what we silence, to look at what we hide. But it is also this experience that strengthens us the most, because it gives us back the only thing that really matters, the connection with who we truly are. Throughout this journey, you have experienced different layers of loneliness: the distance, the silence, the crisis, the darkness, the absence, but also the awakening, the listening, the creation, the reconciliation, and finally, the return. A return to yourself, to life, to the world, not as someone returning from where they fled, but as someone returning with something new in their hands: clarity. This clarity cannot be found in books or in the words of others. It comes from direct experience, from honest struggle, from accepting emptiness without trying to fill it by force, from welcoming what arises in the soul without judgment, and from understanding that behind every silence there was a greater intention. Often, life takes away in order to teach. It pushes away in order to bring closer. It is silent in order to reveal. And when we are willing to walk through this unknown territory with presence, something in us matures in a way that no external achievement could ever provide. It is not that pain was necessary as punishment. It was the instrument to break old shells, so that what was latent within you could finally emerge. Because the true self does not scream. It waits. It waits for you to be ready to listen to it. This process, which seems so intimate, is also universal. At some point in our lives, we are all called to cross the desert, to enter the dark forest, to look within. And although each path is unique, there is a common wisdom that unites us, that everything has meaning, even what we do not immediately understand. When experienced with awareness, solitude restores us to wholeness. It invites us to clear away the excess, to refine our gaze, to reposition our heart, and above all, to stop looking outside for what can only be found within. You are not alone. You never have been. Even when no one else could accompany you, your soul remained with you. Even when the world fell silent, the universe whispered. Even when everything seemed still, something deep inside you was moving. And now at the end of this journey, perhaps you can see what was once invisible. That emptiness, when embraced, reveals fullness. That darkness, when traversed, reveals light. That silence, when listened to, reveals truth. Jung taught us that those who look outside dream, those who look inside awaken. And this awakening has no fireworks. It has peace, a peace that does not depend on circumstances, a peace that comes from knowing that no matter what happens, you have learned to be with yourself, to be home to yourself, to trust the rhythm of your own soul. There may still be days when emptiness creeps back in. It is part of life, but now you know, emptiness is not absence. It is space. It is the womb of the new. It is the pause before creation. It is proof that there is room for something truer to be born. So if loneliness knocks on your door again, welcome it with reverence. It may be once again an invitation to go deeper, and if life takes something away from you, perhaps it is just clearing the way for something greater to enter. You were isolated for a reason, and maybe now you understand. The reason was you. It was your rebirth. It was the call that life needed to make in silence, so that you could finally hear it. If this reflection made sense to you, like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive more reflections like this. That way, you won't miss any new content. Take care and see you next time.